Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Monday, the 14th of November. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. The High Court has rejected the government's request to delay the evacuation of the illegal outpost of Amona, expressing concern that the court-ordered deadlines were being treated as mere recommendations. The judges upheld the order that the outpost be demolished on the 25th of December. They further warned that the government's failure to execute the demolition would send a message that the state can be deterred from enforcing the law by threats of violence. This after the Attorney General warned that a bill to retroactively legalize West Bank outposts is unconstitutional and illegal under international law, and he cannot defend it in the High Court. Yesterday, the Ministerial Committee for Legislation unanimously approved the so-called regulation bill against the objections of the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, who explained it amounts to an expropriation of private property. It will now receive official coalition backing as it progresses through the Knesset and moves to its first reading, expected Wednesday. Proposed by the Jewish Home, the bill is intended to stop the court-ordered demolition of the outpost of Amona, built on private Palestinian land. The demolition is scheduled for Christmas Day. The regulation bill would work by retroactively legalizing illegal West Bank outposts if residents can prove government involvement in their establishment, and would require the state to compensate the Palestinian landowners financially or in kind. At an emergency meeting to stave off the vote, Defense Minister Lieberman reportedly rebuked Bennett for endangering the entire settlement movement on an electoral whim. He later warned any new policies regarding settlement must be coordinated with the incoming Republican administration in the U.S. According to leaked reports from that meeting, the Prime Minister admonished Minister Bennett as childish and irresponsible, saying he was seeking a postponement of the demolition from the court. Residents of Amona and Ofra have kicked off a protest week to overturn the demolition orders. Residents of 9 houses slated for demolition in Ofra are pitching tents outside the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem in protest.
We came to Israel especially to support Amona and Ofra and the communities that are being threatened. We believe that Jews must not destroy homes of Jewish people.
Opposition members slammed the vote for undermining the rule of law in Israel. Opposition leader Isaac Herzog likened Amona to a virus, saying the residents' refusal to evacuate despite a court ruling 2 years ago is damaging Israel and endangering its democracy. Yesh Atid chairman Yair Lapid said ministers know the High Court will annul the law if passed, and said that they are pushing for the bill because they want the public to direct their anger at the High Court and not at them, the politicians. Separately, a spokesman for the Palestinian Authority president said the Palestinian government would appeal to the UN Security Council against the proposed law. Isaac Herzog has since clarified that by virus he was referring to the regulation bill and not the settlers of Amona themselves, after the Prime Minister demanded he apologize immediately. Joining us now from our Tel Aviv studio is attorney Yossi Fuchs, chairman of the Legal Forum for the Land of Israel. Yossi, welcome.
Welcome.
The High Court has told the government that it's reached its final deadline to demolish Amona. Have we reached the end of the road?
No, that was to be expected. But that's basically the reason why the ministers insisted on voting last night on the law that comes to regulate and change the status of the land, because that's basically the only option left to actually settle it before the deadline of Amona.
And why not go ahead and demolish if the court has said on multiple occasions that the settlement is illegal and should be demolished?
I'll explain. First of all, the court has said that on a status of a certain legal status that's to be changed now, and that, you know, the court has to rule and the legislators have to make laws. That's the way the system works.
Yossi, on this regulation bill, the Attorney General has said that this bill violates Israeli and international law and he cannot defend it at the High Court. Your response?
First of all, we have hundreds of attorneys that signed a petition. It's going to be in the newspapers towards the end of this week, that if he can represent the state in the Supreme Court, we voluntarily will represent the state. He has the right to reject the law, but the legislators have the right to make the law part of the legislation.
Are you not concerned as a citizen that the government might be acting against its own legal advice if it's told a bill it's trying to advance is illegal?
It won't be the first time that there's an argument between ministers and the Knesset members to the Attorney General. We've seen it in the past, and as I was saying, he has the right to reject and to say his opinion, and they have a right to promote the law, because we actually believe that the new law that was brought last night takes care of all the problems with the international law and can easily be legislated.
The Attorney General says that this bill amounts to the expropriation of private property. Would you agree with that assessment?
No, first of all, we should explain that there's no specific individual that proved his ownership on this piece of land. It's just land that's defined as private property and not state land, but unfortunately the state assisted the building of this settlement, and people have been living there for 20 years, so it makes sense to actually settle it, and that's what things would have been done the same way if it was in Tel Aviv or in Haifa. If there were 20 years later, one discovered that the property was private and not part of the state's property, no one will tear off the building, but rather pay compensation. This law offers 125% compensation to the owner if anyone actually proves his ownership.
But all the same, we're talking about settlements that the court has said are built on private land, and the court gave them an order to leave 2 years ago. What is the source of the reluctance to simply do what the court says and evacuate?
So I'm explaining again. Every Supreme Court ruling is based on a certain legal status. Now, according to the status that was until this law will be passed in the Knesset, Supreme Court ruled what he ruled. The second the status changes, so then we have a total different story, because then the law is different.
Yossi, thank you very much. Separately, the Ministerial Committee for Legislation has approved the so-called Muzin bill, banning mosques from using loudspeakers for the call to prayer. Prime Minister Netanyahu, who supports the bill, told the cabinet he had received countless complaints from citizens of all religions complaining of the loud call to prayer. Israel is committed to freedom of all religions, but is also responsible for protecting its citizens from noise, said the Prime Minister, noting that similar legislation has been passed in Europe. Chairman of the Joint List, Ayman Odeh, blasted the bill, saying its aim is to create an atmosphere of hatred and incitement towards the Arab public. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas warned he would submit a complaint to the United Nations about this too. A report drawn up by the Knesset Research and Information Center found that France, Britain, Austria, Norway and Belgium, as well as Egypt's capital of Cairo and Saudi Arabia, limit the muezzin's call to prayer, as well as, in instances, the heights of minarets. Well, President Rivlin landed in India this morning for a 6-day state visit, accompanied by a large delegation of Israeli businessmen, industrialists and academics. The president landed in Mumbai before heading for New Delhi. During his stay, Rivlin will meet with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and is also expected to sign a number of memoranda of understanding aimed at boosting trade between the two countries. The president will also visit the site of the murder of 6 Jews in the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks and will also pay his respects at memorials for Mahatma Gandhi and Indian soldiers who fell in the First World War. Sheikh Raed Salah, the head of the banned northern branch of the Islamic movement, who is currently serving a 9-month jail sentence, says he is going to embark on a hunger strike to protest prison conditions. Salah was imprisoned in May and is being held in solitary confinement at the Ramon prison in southern Israel after being convicted of incitement to violence and racism over an inflammatory sermon he delivered in Jerusalem 9 years ago. The Israel Prison Service said the 58-year-old returned his dinner last night with a list of conditions that included receiving books, visits and meetings with other inmates. Over in the United States, the Anti-Defamation League has condemned the appointment of Steve Bannon, the executive chairman of the far-right website Breitbart News, as the White House chief strategist. ADL chief Jonathan Greenblatt described Bannon, formerly CEO of the Trump election campaign, as a man who presided over the premier website of the alt-right, a loose-knit group of white nationalists and unabashed anti-Semites and racists. The Trump transition team also announced that the Republican National Committee chair Reince Priebus would be the new White House chief of staff. Meanwhile, in a televised interview with CBS, the president-elect said he would deport or jail up to 3 million illegal migrants with criminal links, vowed future Supreme Court nominees would be pro-life and defend the right to bear arms, reassured he would not seek to overturn the court's legalization of same-sex marriage, and indicated that the main provisions of Obamacare would remain in place. The president-elect also said he would take a symbolic salary of only $1 a year as president. Tehran is seeking to seal a deal with Moscow to purchase T-90 tanks, advanced artillery systems, fighter jets and helicopters, all for the princely sum of $10 billion. Viktor Ozerov, head of the Russian Parliament's Upper House Defense and Security Committee, is currently visiting the Islamic Republic. He confirmed to reporters that a potential deal is being discussed by the two countries. Earlier this year, during a visit to Moscow, Iran's defense minister signed an arms contract deal valued at $8 billion, further seeking a shopping list that included fighter jets, coastal defense missile systems, and anti-ship missiles, as well as helicopters and other arms. Back at home, Agriculture Minister Uri Ariel is coming under fire for giving the Russian Prime Minister an impromptu gift of a 200,000 shekel drone. According to a report in Kalkalist, Russian Premier Dmitry Medvedev expressed interest in the UAV during a visit last week to the Volcani Agricultural Research Center, and the minister decided to give it to him on the spot. The drone belongs to the research center, not the ministry directly, and Volcani's representatives tried in vain to delay the decision to give it away, since this is expected to interfere with research this year. At the end of the meeting, 2 Russian men took the drone with them and loaded it on the plane back with the Russian premier. Moshe Reuveni, a representative of the Volcani Center's researchers, told press that Minister Ariel's decision represents a complete violation of good management and all the rules that govern the visits of foreign dignitaries. Police detained 3 Sderot municipality workers for questioning this morning, including a senior member of the city's religious council, on suspicion of receiving bribes, theft and breach of trust. The arrests followed a covert and protracted investigation by the National Police Fraud Squad. Police are also investigating suspicions that workers charged the public excessively for absorption in religious services. The homes and offices of the suspects were raided by police this morning. Some 400 taxi drivers parked outside the Transport Ministry in Jerusalem today to protest the decision to reduce taxi fares by 12%. Police shut down roads leading to the government ministry compound in the capital and called on the public to use alternative routes. Earlier this month, the Transport Ministry ordered the cut in taxi fares upon recommendation by a government ministry in accordance with the Finance Ministry. One of Jerusalem's most iconic ancient sites, the Tomb of Absalom, has been damaged in a suspected arson attack over the weekend. Authorities from the Nature and Parks Authorities said that the pyramid-shaped burial tomb in the Kidron Valley was severely blackened from the fire. The tomb, traditionally linked to King David's rebellious son Absalom, actually dates from the 1st century and was likely an aristocrat's grave. Police have launched an investigation into the case. Meanwhile, sticking with archaeological sites, archaeologists digging in Tel Gezer have uncovered a treasure trove of gold and silver objects dating back to the Canaanite period. The treasure was found inside a clay pot, still wrapped in fabric, and included a medallion featuring a silver disc engraved with an 8-pointed star and with horns to connect it to a necklace. The treasure also included a gold-covered Egyptian seal from the Hyksos period. Archaeologist Zvika Tsuk said the findings were likely a ceremonial offering meant to connect the Canaanite and Egyptian gods. Gezer in the Ayalon Valley was a major city in the Bronze Age 3,600 years ago and was also mentioned in the Bible. Turning abroad, a powerful earthquake measuring 6.3 in magnitude hit New Zealand's South Island overnight. The aftershock came just hours after a 7.8 quake hit the same area, triggering tsunami warnings which were later downgraded. So far, 2 people have been killed and dozens injured. Buildings collapsed, roads were damaged, power and telecoms lines were down, and landslides blocked access to major roads. Authorities are warning of strong aftershocks expected in the coming days. Emergency response teams flew by helicopter to the region at the epicenter of yesterday's quake, some 91 kilometers northeast of Christchurch. Prime Minister John Key estimates the damage at billions of dollars.
So some very short-term practical issues that need to be resolved, making sure that we get more water, food and ultimately people in here to support the nearly 600 people that are at the welfare centre, because the road access points here are blocked off. The only way through is flying people in and out. There's quite a number of tourists now who are ultimately stuck with international connections, so we'll have to think about that.
Good news for rock music lovers. American rock band Aerosmith today announced plans to embark on a farewell European tour next year called Arrivederci Baby. The continent-wide tour will kick off in Tel Aviv's Hayakon Park on the 17th of May. After playing in Israel, the band will continue to Georgia, Russia and Germany and will play across Europe until early July. In finance, the shekel is mixed and the stock exchange is down. And before the weather forecast, step outside this evening to catch the rare supermoon. Tonight, the nearly full moon is the closest it has been to Earth in nearly 70 years and will appear 14% larger and 30% brighter than usual. Here in Israel, the moon will loom largest at around 5:45 in the evening. If you miss it tonight, you can catch another supermoon, albeit further away next month. The next time after that a full moon will come as close to the Earth will be in 2034. Turning to weather, and the forecast is calling for partly cloudy skies with an additional drop in temperatures becoming seasonal. And that's all for today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, have a good evening, live from Jerusalem.